Now, artists like Bourgeois and Giacometti use the idea of sublimation. For example, Giacometti, I think, crossing the road, a car went over his foot, and instead of screaming out, he held it inside and let it out with one of his sculptures. So he focused and channeled the energy. And sorry, I'm old, I'm 76, and I tend to forget what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just my mind goes. Okay, so desublimation is freeing up the libido. This is sublimation. The sexual part. Once you free up the libido, you make art then, or the art object, open for the culture. So this process is why you've got your Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin as leaders, because it's popular culture. It's been turned upside down. This has been facilitated through this the definition of desublimation. So it's quite a big word in art. So coming back to this is Art and Rose, I think. It's in the history of 27. It's a big book on this American art historian. This is her reference here. So at this point, what was that? That was a bit of metal with wheels on it. What is that? And it moves. And then, I don't know, what is all that about? It's something that people get into. What do they get into it for? There's all sorts of agreements. It's complex. This metal, and somehow this metal moves. And there's things like tickets, timetables. This is when this issue, about 27 minutes or 24 minutes, became an issue because it was critical. I would have caught this train. So that phenomenon, in a sense, was denied me. So I was trying to bring in an equal phenomenon. Now, I went to LA to find out about rhythm and blues, and ended up, immersed in the aesthetic. The aesthetic in Los Angeles is different to the aesthetic, certainly on the East Coast, absolutely to European. It's an art object of itself it's nothing basically. So art is as it's produced is a conceptual tool. It's used to see in life. How that plays out is one of the light and movement. It was a movement. It's another word for it is Finnish fetish, but it was a light and sound. I think the light and sound. Yeah. Part of that movement, Larry Gold, Robert Irwin, but Larry Gold, he had a retrospective in Albuquerque, and I saw the catalogue. And in the back, he said how East Coast artists, Rauschenberg, Asperger, asked the metaphysical question, why? So what is Asperger's a bronze cast of a beer can, and renamed it art. So it was sort of beginning of this desublimation process anyhow. But the West Coast artists asked the metaphysical question, how? So it's the how do you, not the why, which is sort of kind of cookie man as far as that, but it's actually how you, and what they do is they use the movie industry and art of working. Sculptors will be output to the thousands of an inch because they've got technology and they've got lots of money to invest to actually make things work. So we're working almost in the area of hallucinations. There was I saw a particular piece on display and the image popped forward, but then somebody walked between me and the image, and the image was there despite the fact that the person was blocking the thing. So it was really working on quite a freaky level. So this is where West Coast artists is coming. It facilitated something to do with hallucination and hallucination as an artistic experience, which fits in with areas of neurobiology in terms of the process of seeing. So in the time of the Renaissance, the Impressionists, the colour theorists were concerned with primary colours and secondary colours, or rainbow colours basically, and how that works. But what we're into now is we're working with consciousness as an equivalent. Sorry, I've forgotten what I'm talking about again. Okay, I'll come back to what is this? This bit of metal? It's by consent, it's by practice, it's by tradition, because traditionally England, I think, was one where the first railway was built, and so we've had it for tradition for over 200 years, or 150, however long it is. So it's part of ritual of life and an understanding, and the railway has always played a significant role. Culturally, just as an example, I don't know if I've seen the Abbey villages, but in India, the train has even a more symbolic life. So there's this wonderful shot, it passes to Charlie, I think it is, with this little boy running through the sweet field and looking across the railway lines, and the train passes. You see the building, you see the little boy's face. The symbolism of a railway is actually communication between villages and communities, on even a more profound level than it is here. But here in Spain, I don't have a car, and I'm 76, so I can cycle. That's my only way of communicating. So the train is essential here. And actually, coming out of this process, what we learned about space specifically, since the last 2 days, not today, but yesterday, the day before, this is working with God, that the railway was built in 1880, well, the church was 1880. But before that, the way itself was situated geographically, slightly that way. In 1840, a chapel was built, and we visited, we walked from the nearest mainland. So these are from these origins, at that point, there was a Nobel grant program about megaliths that they constitute right up the west coast of Britain and elsewhere in Ireland, for what these stone things represent. Well, no one knows, but they're something like free religion, in as much as they're celebrating not like in an enclosed space like the churches, but like the phenomenon of nature. And this is a free exchange. And there's no trade, we don't trade. This is free trade. We really exhort to the forces, the bigger forces of the universe outside. So there was a holding. To me, this we call it paganism, or you can call it Druid practice in England specifically. So all of these traditions, then they get more refined. So here we come back to the railway, and you can pay money and they get very certain time they expect to be able to do it. And their bodies are transported. So right. Then I got to thinking about that. This is all experiment going on in the faith, and it links in with what I'm saying here. At that point, but what happened to me, when I was 14, I went to the Tate Gallery, and I saw a bit of which I think was Nero. Well, they're just an object on a wall. These got the power to do something. And they transform my life because I recognise something in it. Like this thing, which is a train, which is another, object. A painting has this. So I'm prisoner of the same sort of worship of objects, inanimate objects. So what is all this about? So, thinking back to the train, it's to get somewhere, from somewhere to somewhere else. And then that plays into other societal roles. But what it was in art, it's specialist. Because I think it's not something anyone can take a train, as long as they know how to use money and can read timetables, can talk to people, and all that sort of thing. So not anyone can what's the word? Pick up the wires from a painting CD, wasn't art. I got it straight away, I didn't even want to tell me that. Screamed out. So this language I got, and I think that's a talent. That's something we've all doing, that ability to, and from that point on, I don't know, I spent probably a quarter of my life in galleries, but thousands of hours around galleries. So that really informed my whole consciousness. And the language from art So when words are being said against what I've lived with, i.e. the word for artist communication, whatever they're called, it's a different language and it impacts on it anyhow. So it's specialist, so then that got me thinking about that. So then I was thinking about another thing that happened to me. I had when I was we went to Italy with the art school. Soars in the sky. I've got two teenagers.
As the leaves that die
put
each
the
fall,
ice in
teach us the new, as the sea that rises in the spring. Teach me to forget myself.
What was that? That wasn't like missing the train, that was a different experience. And that affected me internally, not externally. So what was the nature of that sensation? So it transfers the function from the person as it's something playing on the person rather than the object observed. Similarly, because I trained with Lee Strauss, I studied method acting, Stanislavski's method. And what that is essentially is, up to that point, there was no university or school that taught how to act. What is acting? So what Stanislavski did, he interviewed hundreds or thousands of famous actors and asked them what they did in order to get into character. And from that knowledge, he synthesized it into what was called a method or a process that was later taken when we found a couple of Stanislavski's pupils emigrated to America, and he got influenced from the horse's sound, and he developed this practice which was method acting. But essentially, you're working with your autonomic nervous system. So just like a kid who's got a finger that's a gun, and an adult comes and they say, and the kid says, "Are you crazy? It's on your finger." So the child knows that that's both a finger and a gun. It's called physiognomic perception. Also, children know that when a thing gets further away, it doesn't get smaller. It stays the same size. But because we've been indoctrinated by perspective, we think that things get smaller in the distance, which is total crap. It's rubbish. So children, if you can hang on to things, another thing that was physiognomic perception is to cycle a bike and cycle on the top, do about 5 or 6 different things at the same time. They're all aspects of this. So what I'm trying to say is at different ages, we have different strengths that come and go, but at each age has its own strength. That's something to sort of bear in mind. So what the thing about method acting is, coming back to the object, a musician, for example, say a violinist, has a violin on which to play. Now, so that's with a method actor, it's their own body to play on, it's much more complex. But it's still an object, so it's how you see the body as a performing surface. Now, how that would play out and explain what performance art is when I just saw the Neros and I got this internal experience from it. So that's looking at this. If you take what this experience is, i.e. looking at a painting, and project it onto human form, that's what performance art is. It's the development from looking at something to the human person. But the aesthetic is then the responsibility of the performance artist to evoke the aesthetic that would necessarily be contained within a 2 or 3 dimensional object. And there's a compliancy that in performance art, not only the person who is a performance artist is self-disciplined to just project that, or you could call it a persona. They also, people who come have to have that in mind in order to make the whole. So modern art arches. I mean, if you go back to medieval times, it was the church that had sculptures around it. And most people were illiterate. And it was early writing, i.e. the sculptures would tell them the story. So they went to a church to look at the pictures in order to read. So this was the origin. And they said, well, it's done by going on. And then it got taken into Greek art and Egyptian Greek, and then through to the Renaissance, when there was a humanitarian element, and then you had the 17th century, you had the touch, making it even more every day. So it's all the time getting more and more internalised and personalised. So what's that about 1850 to 1880, up to the Kansas Theatre? What happened then was, right, the artists let go ownership of it. You know, back in medieval times it was Christianity, and that was you're bound by that, that's the ordinary thing. But in the 19th, into the 20th century, they gave up ownership of the art object and set it free. So literally it was everybody who looked at it. Initially, that was only Jesus Christ who owned it. In this time, it's free and it's trusting people, Calvinism and that which is created trust in God. So it's not a thing out there, it's a thing within. And so with that within, we're just as easily able to take responsibility to take on board the message from the table. But you then do what you will with it. So 50% of it is what then you make of it, which plays into what the West Coast artists are doing in terms of conception. So they're taking forward, it's like, sure, 50 years maybe in England, they're beginning to catch up a little bit, artists with working in that respect, totally non-egoistic way. But there's so much, people still want to call themselves artists and things like that, so they haven't yet grown up probably, they're still very elementary, if you like, entirely, but they're not using, you know what's happened in the last 200 years in modern art? Come on, wake up. But basically, this is so this is what is called it came out of what Jackson Pollock, the famous which is literalism. He said, now a tree just grows. It doesn't say, I'm a tree. I'm worried about dying in 150 years' time. It's just there, well, we don't know. That's the cover of but let's just say that was his point. Okay. So he said, in the same way that a tree grows, we art. So the way we walk, literally everything is art. So he reclassifies not just the canvas area, but the whole of everything as art. And that ties in with this book, which is very interesting, the Psychosis hypothesis. I'm going to try to read this in. But it's the way in which late capitalism has been affected by what was called cybernetics. I think Paradoxy developed it. And then it hit England in the 40s and 50s. And then when it to America, it got retranslated and redescribed as data. But essentially data is cybernetics. Now what effect that had, you had in the 70s Marion Ferguson in the anyhow, she introduced the idea of paradigm shifts, shifts of consciousness. The Aquarian conspiracy, that was the thing. So we started thinking of consciousness from the 70s on in a different way. Actually, you can have brand new experiences spontaneously, and that they can be triggered. Well, I'll leave that because it's a relational area. But this is anyhow, this is literalism. So, in performances, my experience, and I came on board in the late 60s, with choices for self-mutilation or sex. It was a basic thing. And I went to sex because I didn't want to cut myself. But it developed, this is how this whole thing about psychosis has resulted. Actually, I went on a more dangerous course, and it resulted in, I think, 1,000, and there's a code over there about 1,000 murderous psychotic rages that I had over 25 hours for 30 years. And I projected it all onto my mum, And so this is the story of that process. And I had this documentary made later of my life. And I did a deal with my mum about 6 years before the car crash. That I did an outline of her body. We're having a ceremonial, ritualistic moving of everything back to our bungalow after this. So if you're part of that, then you'll be able to see the bungalow and the paintings of Mum and everything like that. So that's like the second component. So I see this bungalow here as and my studio as all part of the same process. So I'm trying to link up, and through that, let's call it psychogeography. I'm moving between different places. So the first debate was about the spiritual underpinning of psychosis, which is the voice, the trapped, increasingly trapped voice of reason that we have in ourselves in a psychotic state, and the total frustration that over it can come out as violence, an uncontrollable violence. So the image for that is of understanding it is, roughly, I had my art history teacher, Emmanuel Boateng, who was the 18th century father. He said, explain to your parents you've got two people inside you. You've got this well-adjusted, kind, civil, each regularly sleeps and blah blah person, but you've also got this amoral army where there are no limits whatsoever. But assure your parents that this one person is in control of the amoral army. So what psychosis is when this amoral artist takes over from the nice person. A classic example I would say is Hitler. And this is classic. And I've got a movie, I've got a director who is Ecuadorian, who wants to take on the project. We do work with quite a few years on it so far. Mass psychosis. And it presents a different view of what Hitler used mass psychosis to see the development of fascism. And at art school, we were taught that in the 19th century, the only original thinkers, or the main thinkers, were Darwin, Freud, and Marx. Whereas in the 20th century, only produced one original philosophy, which was fascism. So we have to go through our own innate fascism, which we all possess, as being, well, not everyone in the 20th century, some of us are born in the 21st century. But from that era, we're tainted by that. Now, which brings it back to this thing of data, which is late capitalism, which has this, like what politics is bringing out everything. So it's the whole person, everything is out basically. Then everything becomes open in capitalism. You've got control over nothing. So the natural balance is kind of insecurity. By definition, late capitalism is insecurity. Now, if you see people, I don't know if you see people, will ask you, how are you? And you say, good. Now, why I always move, I don't know, so I'm asking how you are. Because what this is there's a thing in capitalism which is trying to adjust to the fact that it in truth is unstable or insecure, and they're trying to put a false sense of security. And this, in a society term, is en masse, because everyone's doing it, lots of people do it, to say, oh, I'm good, which is just a subconscious message to say, I want stability, and I'm assuring you that I understand that I need it within this particular system of mobile phones and computers. That whole world of mobile phones, computers, the whole thing is part of what is called the cybernetic hypothesis. Now, it's been given freedom, and as a consequence, it's even taken control of socialism and communism, and made them effectively inert. So the only way to, this is just really important, just a very brief outline, the only way to get past all of this is panic. Now, panic in a enclosed state like this, if I were to induce the state of panic and say there's a fire going on, we'd all rush to the door, and maybe some of us will get injured because there's just a narrow exit. But in nature, a herd of gazelles or something, and there's a buffalo coming by, panic, it's a safety mechanism. So it's engendered through fear. So fear is the dominant thing. So we don't have hope anymore of late capitalism, but we do have panic and fear as methods of getting outside the system. Because what capitalism depends upon is progress, it depends upon feedback, it depends upon communication. All these words are loaded words. And you go further, there's an American philosopher, West Coast frontier philosopher, who started questioning, he questioned words like analysis, scientific words. He said they're complex words, but pretty meaningless because they're too complex. So everyone would accept analysis as a scientific word. Actually, it's meaningless. He used the example of a bachelor, or I'm an unmarried man. Now, an unmarried man is a clear statement, but a bachelor is a complex word that you can't really demystify. So similarly, these words like analysis, like there's a whole bunch of them that people just use without thinking, basically, but we've assumed it as well. But we're again buying into this illusory world. So all of these things are working to break down the idea of individualism. Now, actually, we're individual agents, we're not part of the collective. That is a fantasy, that is a conceit that's been brought up to make things happen. But it's basically, another word for it is neoliberalism, but they're all within the definition of late capital. So you can't, it's all consuming. When you buy into one, you buy into the whole thing. But I want to be now, consider all these ideas, I want to be myself. So the only way is to come outside the system, and this is it's called guerrilla warfare. So we have to, so that's like, so anyhow, we're coming from method acting, which emphasise, to performance art. Well, there's another dimension. Now, if you're a method actor, going back to playing, instead of the violin, you're playing your own body. In performance art, you are your own body. So there's even a deeper thing. So as a performance artist, what I've done, I've synthesised literalism, and it included Stanislavski's sensory work. And I thought I was really onto something, but I was talking to Russian colleagues, and there are whole universities that have studied this for centuries. It's nothing new. We have a conceit in the West that we have ownership of ideas. And now what's happening to the world is, because of the internet works, we're realising actually we've got a certain amount of knowledge, but other civilizations have other certain amounts of knowledge. And anthropology people, very proud of that. It's a page a week you can read of this, but there are really complex implications of cross-cultural communication. But very simply, there are different attitudes to life. Buddhist logic, for example, is totally different to Western logic. When you go to Thailand, this is the thing that the monks can't look at women in the eyes, you can't take someone to see someone. So that way of thinking is alien to Western thinking. So to deal with and to get part of that society, you have to have an understanding of that. So this is what's happening in the world. All of our history is being rewritten in terms of the world. It's an enormous project. It's mind blowing. Okay, so here we go with performance art. Is then what it is in actuality is my body. I am me, not just I'm acting on me. I am me. Now let's get back to what. So to take one step further into performance art in the vision, being the self becomes focused. My descriptions of psychosis is where the immoral artist takes over from the moral about different categories. So performance art becomes vulnerable to psychosis, because if the definition, as I've defined it, of psychosis is where the amoral artist takes over from the kind. I've just described the way into performance art. You step right into being the amoral artist. So that's the entry point. So you're susceptible in this thing not in a psychotic state, and it might be to do with what we're understanding, what we're trying to the spirituality underpinning psychosis. You're stepping, but it's even more difficult. It's very clear, the difference between the broadcast and actuality. But you have to have that even more clearly, or you could literally slip into an actual psychotic state, because you're really, I mean, we're getting this consciousness here at a profound level. This is what performance art is. It is not entertainment. It is not something you pack afterwards. It is there to disturb you. It is there to make you think, reevaluate everything. And it's about something more than anything. If it becomes not about something, it's self-aggrandizement, it's self-indulgence, basically. So I am writing this because at the last minute I forgot to do something I scrupulously planned to do. The loss of missing the movies, waylaid by not having the correct debit card. So had I gone into Southampton that day, something had happened that there was a scam with my debit card, and as a consequence, someone was using my debit card, so I had to have it closed from the bank. And I was forgetting this, so when I went to Southampton, I had the old debit card, and had I gone in there, I couldn't have used it. So actually, the way that it turned up, so as it was lost, having lost, but the act of forgetting, with the sense of loss of something highly focused and carefully planned, necessitated my writing these records of events. Normally, I wouldn't have taken the effort to write this down, but it was this act of realising that actually this is what I didn't go, that said, now, that signifies and justifies me writing it. Again, it's about something. You don't have to write down hysterically. Some people write down hysterically. This is would be my definition of insanity. But you write down, you know, for example, you go into a foreign country, you go to the toilet, you have to communicate that to the person you're talking to. You're not offended. You have to somehow. So all of life, as far as I'm concerned, is about something. And similarly with art, it functions. Starting with the artist in caveman times who was signified of bison as a source of food, it supplied a function. And if you're not supplying a social function, it's in my opinion, it's in, bison, I mean, who knows, I don't call it wrong, it's set up by our reviews. Anyhow, the 4-day schedule here, and justifying, it's like having to bring. Alright, so go back a little bit. The case in point, having forgotten. What happened was, I had 4 days in London preceding this, where I saw this on the show. Now, this is very, on the talk, whatever you want to call it, is my tutor was came forward, and he thought that Donatello was a superior sculptor to Michelangelo, in the same sense that he thought Mozart's music was superior to Beethoven's, in the respect that they still had a classical element. And that classical element it's kind of what Wilmershey did when he went back to Greek sculpture in the Renaissance rediscovery, could measure it, and he measured the proportions of the parchment and brought that back. That was classicism, i.e. that was an order. What Cézanne was looking for when he was working with Poussin is these, what is it, the sphere, the cube, those determining factors in perceiving what you see. So he uses systems to see, i.e. you look at a mountain to see how cuboid it is, or how much off it is, and that's a determining value that you use to make a mark, to make a mark out. Not a literal copying with the surface of it, but something to do with the structure, something at a more interesting level. So that was but what I plan to do on these 4 days is Donatello, and I'm looking at this, and this here, who's an architect, is dealing with the philosophy of architecture. The point about, I don't do green painting and sculpture, but what Ken told me in order to get your art, get your craft, is 3 or 4 years it takes to basically be able to see or perceive the centre of gravity of mass. So that is, if you can get a feeling for that, then a sculpture, it's there. A lot of sculpture is just to do with the outside. You can see it. It's somebody dealing with superficial things. But what the point they were talking with Chris was that he said, yeah, in architecture too, if you have a mass, an object, and you hang it from 3 different points, then it balances at the point of the centre of gravity, and you can balance that mass on the needle point. So this is that's a tacit, it's a determinant, it's something that's fixed. You can't do a painting without both constant and variable. Because if it's all variable, you're changing it all the time. That's what I'm doing, you're changing it all the time, you're not doing it. You need change to be viewed against something constant. So you need those 2 elements. So in a sense, otherwise it's again Karl Kuckerman, going too much into romanticism with perhaps Beethoven or Michelangelo. I mean, it's not dissing their art in any sense, but it's just not my interest. It's not, it doesn't relate so directly or interestingly to consciousness. It takes it away from a sense of control. I think that's an element in the creative process. And so, Ken, when I went to Paris, I went to hear, what's the name? There were 5 women who were, it's called the Ninth Street. Anyhow, the abstract expression is Pollock, de Kooning, and so, well, Pollock's wife was Lee Krasner, and Elaine de Kooning, and then there was Joe Mitchell. Now, Elaine de Kooning, well, they both supported their husbands, because the husband married them. Oh, they'll get thinner than that. Forget about the career of the Now, John Brackley, the English sort of free pop artist, had a wife who was more talented than him. It was just recently. And he tried to suppress her because he was threatened by the fact that he had really good. And it's not dissimilar with these artists. So what I wanted to do, when Pollock saw late Monet went to Venice in his late life to retire, and instead of doing that, he finished 50 paintings. And it started this whole late period with the water living. So that's where abstract expressionism comes. And I find sort of conception that the abstract expression picked up on that. It's in the gesture of spontaneity. Now, I think that the woman's voice, very heartily, there was a show on the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, and I went out to see. And it's, what is the woman's mark? Is it gestural like Pollock's? And it wasn't. When I saw it, it's mind-blowing. There's 12 artists, there's Anne Frankenthal too. We've only seen some of the prints, we haven't yet finished. So I've seen the big cover of the tapes from 15 years ago. But again, I've seen nothing that relates to it. But this Joe Mitchell was just incredible. Like it was revelatory. And what the connection is wasn't in the gesture, but it was in the hue. So some of like one arms as well, some outside with these beautiful lines and everything. It's the hue, and it's the link then, because it's about something. It's not about gesture. It's about actually having a talent for working with colour and allowing the colours to speak and giving the freedom. Colours are stronger than we are. They're a message of spirituality, this is the sense I'm using them in here, because Candice is concerned when he wrote concerning the spiritual in art, because apocalyptic vision. Anyhow, I'll pick up to the great artist. Yeah, and so I came away with that, and so now another artist, or whatever they're called, we worked on these together, Anya, and and I said, right, if you're working with spirituality of psychosis, you work with Hugh. Just you isn't going to do it, because it creates, well, accidentally Pollock committed suicide because he couldn't take what he was doing any further. It wasn't his to take, it was a gift, you see, and he didn't see that. And because of his egoism, he trapped himself in a dead end. How do we get, so this we've created with just hues. Just hues and students are, don't use browns or blacks or white, just use pure colour, i.e. the three complementary, yellow, red and blue, and then the complementary violet, green and orange. And I've restricted myself to those, as I said, to my whole life. This is what the Impressionists took up to that day. Some people are reverting, going back, well, fine. But again, it's not pushing it and making it discovered. Now, this is what we use here to try to communicate because of the language of psychosis. Now, what I'm saying that is, let me get to mention sorry about this, I'm just trying to find a place. So, when I was in London these 4 days, I also saw the, which I would highly recommend, the Alice Neal show at the Barbican. There's a wonderful hour-long documentary with it's Jack Kerouac who's narrating it, and it's given by Gregory Corson. That was her period. It's absolutely a fascinating show, and that was the time that she was. Then also the Spanish show I saw at the Royal Academy. Beautiful little Velasquez and Zurabang portrait, and of course the Royals. And also the Hispanic. The way, what he had done, that collector, this collector's daughter, it was the interaction, not i.e. the Spanish or the Mexican, it was what came out of the consonants of the two coming together. And it's very interesting, it's the whole, it's the self-listening clip. I also wanted to take my suit in to be dry cleaned. There's just one place in London, it's a Marley suit, I don't want to get it messed up. And I figured out how I can leave that. It's a place in Whitechapel, and I can fit it all in. Anyhow, of course, I forgot to take it with me on the 4 days. So how did I adjust to having forgotten to take which was justified me carrying a bag because I put my suit in it. What in part sparked developmental thinking, or the spiritual underpinning of psychosis, was in addition to falsely. Now what happened, I'm not very good with computers, I'm coming into this world, and we had a meeting last Tuesday, planning for this week, and as I was zooming in, anyhow, a complex thing, I falsely accused Claudia of having told me that the meeting was just Zoom. In fact, it was Anya who told me. So I apologised to Claudia for having falsely accused her, and I accused her of lying. But not being able to adjust because of the dimension of computers. So what I'm saying, I myself am sort of contaminated by this move into technology. And when I don't like to be in a place where I'm entirely dependent, but it's being manoeuvred such that we have no choice at some kind to be totally, and it makes my thinking, it affects me. I'm not the kind person. It opens up to the psychotic side and all these things. So these are things why I'm saying you have to get outside them, or by buying into them a little bit, by definition they'll and also I plan to talk about the history of performance art as a lecture yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, at 5 o'clock. But Andy suggested I defer that again, but I then, as a consequence of that, thought, well, why can't I, because I've got a contact with Gallery 46, Gallery 46 in Whitechapel, who are relatively well. I'll present to Sean. I would like to do 3 talks on spiritual underpinning of psychosis and how performance art is turning into walking art, and also of the spirituality of place. And we saw a terrific example with Emmanuel, who, because I think it was all Dahomey, that whole area, because it got redefined by Europe or even Britain, into countries which cut across that from tribal areas. But that included turning in a little bit of, even a bit of Nigeria, certainly Togo, and into Ghana. And I went to the voodoo ceremony, which was in Benin, Rima. It's annual, the 16th of January. And I started off in Alada, and in about 50 kilometres north of Rima. And in the square where all of this was happening, there were an area as a sacramental space, as a performance space, as a ceremonial space, as a religion. There were about 9 or 10 different definitions of the space and the way in which it's orchestrated. So I then became hip or aware that possibly part of the cultural African is a European construct, so these are all very suspect words to use, but just in, I've got to say something. So, but in that, there's that cultural thing has a sense of place as a spiritual element that's not necessarily in European art. It's more sophisticated. It's one very poor country, but highly sophisticated from the awareness of space and personal space. And there's a thing, certainly in Ghanaian textiles, where the design not only is an aesthetic, but it's also tells people what area they come from in Ghana. So it's a space-related design. So again, it's about something. See? Anyhow, the other thought that I had, as well as these 3 lectures came out of what Anya said, I had the idea to approach women. I've done 30, 35, 40 radio programs on residence about all this development. I won't go there because I'll forget what I'm talking about. So with my 6 days, in hindsight, on both, justifying the request for another talk on resonance shattering, which I just talked about. In this case, to proceed to produce an excuse to come up to London again to pick up my suit. Now, actually, the way not forgetting my suit, I was able to get more out of the thing, and I was able to get the Alice Neal. I wouldn't have taken in so much as I did had I got from the thing. So it's just a way to facilitate things. To drop off will soften additionally by this, which was additionally softened by my what it necessitated by the down, and to enlarge the planned talk to approach Gallagher 46 for a series of 3 lectures presented, i.e. the spiritual underpinning of psychosis before the start of walking art and spirituality. Right. Now here's a quote from this book, which sort of summarises: there is no one machine of all machines. So this is an early reference to the metal which had wheels on it. So there is no one machine of all machines. This metal is one, and there is no one. But there can be a thought concerned with all machines. So like if you're dealing with i.e. art as an object, what the human dimension, if you come out of that into performance art, it's much bigger. So dealing with the human subject, it's much more complex. As I say, you're working on psychosis in different areas. So I've got this last statement. How this plays out in my experience. Now, there's a fine line to be drawn between health and safety and control. And the difficulty of negotiating this, which, with the best intentions in the world, can easily be misperceived. In my experience, as the will to control appears skies, which in turn engender resentment. So what I'm saying there is this, well, it's what I said there. Right, that'll do it. Right, end of performance, guys. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a ritual ceremony or
Well, I think we got some cool. That was fun.
How long was that?
That's fun. This is cool.
What do you think? Is it,
I was
is it
definitely
good
getting
event?
into
Do you
a
think it
ritual
worked?
with
Yeah,
your
thank you.
words, and when I sat up after doing this at the beginning for ages, and I saw that you guys had done all of this, I was like so thrown. Because it felt like I was asleep, and I woke up and I was like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
And we have some perspectives of the journey. We found the center of mass. It's not falling over.
See, then the solidity of those is sort of reinforcing that.
Yeah.
So they're speaking
Yeah.
in visual terms, in sculptural terms, not in stupid words, but it's something that you can sensorially, just like, you know, people go to art galleries and they take photos of things and they say, well, you can't, for example,
Thank you so much for
you won't
filming
get a
all of
sense of the
that.
plasticity
Yeah.
of whatever it's called that I'm working. So you don't get the aesthetic. So you're denying. The only way to get the aesthetic is look at things for at least 5 minutes or something like that. And that way, you can't. All a photograph is a symbol of what's there.
Yeah, but when you're there, the dialogue between the pieces fills up the liminal space.
Yeah.
They call it the space in between spaces. But you have to be in space to get
You
the
do.
communication. Or else you
There's no other way to do it.
Or else
It's like,
I love the footprints on
But
this.
they're not.
I love them.
They're
I
not
love
vital. It's like statistics are like a bikini. What they show is revealing, but what they conceal is vital.
Yeah.
In that same sense that by not looking at the stuff, but getting in this technological maelstrom that people seem to have got themselves into,
Yeah, for sure.
they're denying themselves something that will actually evolve them as human beings.
Yeah.
Which is what art's supposed to be about. It's not about money, man. It's almost dying.
Rob?
So I'm going on.
Alright, well, thanks, Jason.
What's it? Is it not motor to
I think it'd be great.
Good.
I just was a little bit nervous. I didn't want to like gas you guys to death with this stuff. But
So
Once in a while.
Well, how are we going to do this ceremony? I think everyone's gone.
No, there's some people out there.
Oh, okay.